There we go. Now we're working. Okay, well, hello everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Brianna Belfontaine-Krupski. I am with the State of Maine Office of Teaching and Learning up at the DOE, and I am joined today with Allison Gardner, who is the Director of Maine Students Vote, and she's also a part of the League of Women Voters. And the goal for our conversation today is just to kind of go over some various different things that both of these two really awesome organizations are doing in the state of Maine in regards to civics, and have a little bit of context in how they could help out teachers with various different things in the classroom, and also some ways they're engaging high school students and other students across the state of Maine in their civics world. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Allison, and then we'll get started.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I think you covered it really well. I think I would add is I live out in Freiburg, and so I do cover the whole state with going into classrooms and sharing presentations, and we also offer a lot of remote internship opportunities for high school students, which I'm really excited to share with you all today and talk about some of the resources that are actually created by students for you all. And so the League of Women Voters, a little background and history about how we have two organization names here. Maine Students Vote was founded back in 2017 by a group of college students who wanted a nonpartisan home to engage in civics work. So they wanted a home away from the political parties where they could really learn about civics and engage without feeling any of the like partisan politics pressure. Um, the League of Women Voters became kind of the fiscal sponsor of Maine Students Vote 3 years ago. And we all now operate under the cooperative name of Democracy Maine. So sometimes you'll see these names floating around. Know that they are all one organization, just in the way of nonprofits. As fiscal sponsorships grow and programs grow, we kind of end up with lots of names. Um, the League of Women Voters of Maine, also a program that I run for them under their title, is their youth council. And their youth council is a space where young people from middle school through high school and a little bit after high school can come together, learn resources, and have a space to connect with other young people who are passionate about community engaged work and civics. And then we also have an adult ally program to that youth council where we have a lot of adult volunteers across the state who work with us to connect with high schools and to support the programming and the projects that these young people create.
Awesome. Yeah, I know. I'm super excited to hear more about the Community Ally Program, and I know our office was pretty excited up there. So, um, brief agenda for those of y'all looking at us in terms of what we kind of want to share out with teachers today is we're going to kind of look at what are some of those resources available for educators on behalf of Democracy Maine, League of Women Voters, Maine Students Vote, some work that they're currently doing, a little bit more information on that Community Ally Program, which I think could be a really cool thing. I know I was talking with Allison before, especially for high schools, what might that look like in terms of bringing some of those resources into your civics classroom or government classes that you have across the state. And then Maine Students Vote. What are they working on currently? How can students get involved? Resources for classrooms. And then if we have time, I know we're scheduled for roughly an hour-ish, 45 minutes. If anybody has any questions, we can certainly take those at the end. And then we'll have some resource QR codes to share with y'all as well. So League of Women Voters.
Perfect. Well, the League of Women Voters, as many of you know, is an organization that has more than 100 years of a history here in the state of Maine, working to increase voter education, civic education, and access to the polls so that our Mainers are informed and know how they can vote. The League of Women Voters does a lot. outside of voting. We also work during each legislative session to make sure that Mainers know how to get involved with the state legislature. So we do a similar type of civics education and teaching folks how do you track bills and how do you advocate if a topic comes up that you're passionate about. Um, we really, as an organization, we have about more than 800 volunteers across the state. And so our one of those groups of volunteers that people can join is we call it our youth engagement program. And this youth engagement program has specific, what we call them now, high school liaisons, where you can join our program and work with us to connect with the high school in your community, to help them run voter registration drives, to connect them to curricular resources and various work that young people are doing. I think right now, because January is a new start date for our internship program, folks are doing a little bit of outreach around the internship program, but also knowing it's about to be holiday breaks and end of term. So our kind of high school liaisons are a little bit quiet right now. We also, through that kind of community ally, local liaisons through the high schools program, work with those teams of volunteers when we do voter registration drives to make sure that the students at the school are leading the voter registration drives. We found that, a bunch of retired volunteers going in to the school to work on a voter registration drive, they're not very approachable, right? Like a lot of high school students won't stop and be like, oh, who are you? Why are you here? But if we can find someone in the school, like a social studies class or a key club that wants to organize the registration drive alongside of us, then it's so much more successful. And our volunteers will simply come in and kind of support the students and answer any questions. And there's a training we'll run students through beforehand so that they make sure they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's when it comes to voter registration. And then the youth council is a pretty awesome space. It's been a lot of fun to be a part of this space. And we have young people that join the youth council through a couple of avenues. They can join the youth council through our internship program, which is a paid opportunity for high school and college students to explore democracy and civics and what that means to them and what they're passionate about in a cohort of other young people that kind of share that passion for engagement. And folks also join our youth council just through signing up on a form online, which is on this page that you're scrolling through right now. And they host webinars and they host conversations. One of the conversations they hosted after the gubernatorial election was, what is the state of voter discrimination here in Maine? And they had the Secretary of State, they had one of our tribal ambassadors, and some other folks who specialize in this come together and have a conversation about, like, we know we're a state that has really high voter engagement. Like, we were third in the nation this year. But that doesn't mean we're at 100%, right? Like we're not close to 100%. So who's still being left out and who still doesn't feel, or who feels disenfranchised and doesn't feel like they can vote, or maybe that their vote doesn't matter. So it was a really interesting conversation, and that conversation, the idea for that conversation came from those students. And so then they did the outreach, they invited the speakers, they led the programming, and me and the volunteers I work with in the background kind of supported them in running the tech and helping them answer questions and do run-throughs and build their facilitation and public speaking skills. Our hope is that through participating in these experientially based programs that are giving students moments to, in real time, interact with our government and civics, that we're helping them build those lifelong skills that they can then carry forward to be folks in their community who are helping to create solutions for problems. Say the sidewalk out front of their apartment when they move out of their parents' house, it needs to be updated, and they'll through joining programs like this, they'll have experience knowing, oh, we go to city council and we advocate for the repair of that sidewalk through city council. I think a lot of those ways that students can be community advocates aren't always obvious, right? There's something that has to be learned. And so that's our real goal with all of these programs.
That's really awesome. I know with I'm trying to frame how I want to say this, ask this question. So I mean, I am a civics teacher. I know um, at my school, our civil rights club, I believe, worked and reached out. They applied to the Civics Digest. They held a voter registration drive as well. So that kind of is done through our civil rights team. But if I'm, a high school gov teacher, and I'm interested in kind of looking at the future and saying, hey, I want to host one of these drives. I want to get some youth council involvement in my school. What would be the first step I would take?
The first step you would take would be to reach out to me by email, which my email is right there, and just tell me what you're interested in. We, of course, at this time of year, we're switching gears a bit into legislative
Yep.
education. So we're doing a lot about how do you track a bill? How do you know what bills are published? How do you know where they're at in the process? Um, and how do you write testimony? If there's a topic you're passionate about, how do you submit your opinion on that topic? Since every single bill in the state of Maine gets a public hearing, it's a really opportune moment for students to practice getting involved, and not only practice, but a lot of our committee members and our senators and our representatives love hearing from students because they really want to get involved. And the League of Women Voters, and you're pulling up some of these here, has a lot of bill trackers and a lot of different topics that they track. But we run a youth advocacy team through the Youth Council, where a group of high school and college students follow the bills as they're published and create a youth-led bill tracker. So like a youth-designed bill
Oh, wow.
tracker, which we can share with classrooms, and we try and share it as widely as we can so that students can see what are other students interested in. Um, and we'll send out updates of like what bills have died, what bills have passed, what bills are stalled, what are the committees that they're in.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and it really helps because sometimes, you can see here like there was like LD 1996 means there was 1,966 bills published before that county clean election bill came out. So
Yeah.
there are thousands of bills that our state legislature runs through every year. And in those thousands of bills, there's going to be something that everybody is passionate about. So we really have a fun time as a youth advocacy team pooling in bills from education, bills from housing, bills from economic development so that students can follow those. And that's something that we don't always post on the website because the
Yep.
students are kind of constantly updating it and maintaining it. But that's something that I could share with any teacher. I also could we also come we have a training around bill tracking and writing testimony that was developed by students for other students, and that's something that I've worked with teachers to bring other youth council members into high schools to share. I've also gone in and shared it when students weren't available. And we also work every month to put out a newsletter. So if you're not registered for the Maine Civic Digest, highly recommend you get on that newsletter mailing list. It goes through what are we working on right now? What are the new resources? And we also do a lot of community shout outs of like, what's a cool project a teacher in this school has been working on, or what's a cool project that a student has done that we're really proud of. Um, if you go to,
Trying to think where the main civic. I was on it earlier today.
yeah, go to resources.
Resources, there it is. And
Yeah,
then,
and youth engagement.
oops,
And then
main
just
civic
click.
notice.
There we are.
Ta-da!
Yeah. So monthly newsletter. We try to make it really short and easy to digest. You can see our whole catalog
Oh,
here of back issues. Looks like we got an update to November of this year, but we um we
I was-
send this out on the second Tuesday of every month, and it starts with a spotlight of something that we feel like is an important update. We give an update of what the teams of young people are working on. We always post in here any job openings. Then we do the teacher corner to do these shout outs of really interesting and exciting projects that are being done across the state. And the one that we're scrolling through right now is the edition about media literacy specifically, and what teachers were doing to bridge the back between media literacy and how that implies in our everyday life. We try to give a lot of resources for
yeah,
educators, from professional development to classroom resources. We're always fine tuning this to say, like, I think now we like bold, like, is this a worksheet? Is this a video? And we give you the time of the video. That way it's a really quick, easy thing to scroll through. I know there's a ton of information in here. We also do a section that we call the election information section, which will probably be quiet since
yeah.
we're a little bit out of election season. We've talked about making that like a legislative update
Oh yeah,
section.
that would
So
be awesome.
maybe stay tuned. That might be coming. And then we've done a section called buzzwords, where if there's a word coming up in the news a lot, we provide a definition. And then the data download is a section where any new research that's coming up, we give you a really short summary of it. And then we end with a youth opportunities. And
Yep.
the youth opportunities is applications for paid positions, application for really cool volunteer service opportunities that are competitive, applications for scholarships. And we try and each month we also include a PDF, so someone could link that directly to their Google Classroom
Yep.
if they wanted to share these opportunities with students.
I know the digest is really, really awesome. I know if you're watching this and you're not a subscriber, or you're joining us and you're not a subscriber, that's really a really awesome tool. I know in the newsletter that I've been putting out this year for the Office of Teaching and Learning, I've pulled in some of your resources that you've had into my own newsletter and be like, hey, if you're not signed up, you might want to get into this awesome resource because you guys do have just a ton of information, and I love seeing the updates about some of the options for kids and how they can be involved. I know last year I had posted a couple of those scholarship opportunities and shared them out with the students in my school, and we did have a couple kids apply, which is really awesome to see. So tons and tons of things on your newsletters. They're really awesome.
Yeah, and we do try and keep it pretty like Maine specific, or like
Yeah.
an opportunity that we know is attainable for young people. So you won't find a lot of like national updates in that
Yeah.
space. We try and really tailor it to what we're working on
It's
and
awesome.
to what we know is available.
Love it. Awesome. So yes, so leave women voters. Youth council,
Mhm.
tons of amazing things happening.
Yeah.
And again, I really just love the idea of, getting those students involved in those civic ideas and, just the fact that simple email, hey, I'm interested in kind of getting these things for my classroom. That's super easy peasy. And you can connect it too with your after school extracurricular groups. I know a lot of times teachers double duty and you might be, key club advisor, civil rights advisor, things like that. So it's nice to know it can happen in the classroom and then also maybe even after school if needed.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
All right, Maine students vote.
Yeah, so Maine Students Vote is a space where we do two types of fellowship programs, an election engagement fellow and an advocacy fellow. So you can kind of think of those as a spring fellowship, advocacy time, an election engagement fellowship, a fall fellowship. We do these every year, depending on no matter what type of election year it is, because we always have referendums and local elections in our state every year. So we don't just run this during gubernatorial or presidential years. We do this every single year. Um, we've already talked a bit about the youth advocacy team and our high school internship program. Our high school internship program runs in cohorts. So there's a fall, a spring, and a summer cohort. And the fall cohort kind of leads through the winter. So it's the one that's running right now. It's October through January. And then the spring one starts in February through June and or May sometimes. And there tends to be 3 to 5 paid slots for students, but there's also unpaid versions of ways that students can get involved. And we've recently started partnering with schools that have ELO or other intern for credit programs
Oh,
to
nice.
open up this as a way for students to get their ELO credit or get their like internship credit. So we've been hosting a couple of those this year, which have been really fun. And of course, those happen during the school day, so they're a little bit outside of the like evening cohort model, but they've been really kind of more intensive dives for students too, because most of our other teams are like happening during the day so they can listen in on what's happening in trust in elections or what's happening in voting rights and really get that inside look as well.
That's really awesome. I love it.
So our goals here with all of these programs, with everything we do through the League of Women Voters Youth Council, through Maine Students Vote, is to give young leaders the tools that they need to make an impact or make a difference in their community. So those are public speaking opportunities and ways to build their public speaking skills, ways to build their facilitation skills, knowledge of the legislative system and knowledge of local government, event organizing experience, network building, and so much more. We really try and equip students with those practical skills that they can use to continue to work towards whatever they're passionate about.
It's really, I know I love it so much. You guys, I know just from some of the, I can't remember if where I had heard it or whatnot, if there was another, I think it was when I joined and heard about you myself when I was doing
Mm-hmm.
PD. I remember hearing some of the stories of like former students you had had and that had been joined on the council and like they're kind of involved in other civic organizations now as adults or working in
Yeah.
public service or be paralegaling, like something of that nature. So it's just really awesome to hear just how many students are involved. Do you know how many like schools you're kind of already connected with in the
So if
state?
we look, yeah, if we look at our Civic Digest, we're connected to 130 high schools, which is almost
Awesome.
all of them, which
Wow.
doesn't mean that like somebody in that school is like always in contact with me,
Yeah.
but it means that they're like on our email list and they're kind of keeping track. Over the course of this past kind of busy election season, I think we were at 75 schools. I'm still pulling some of those numbers, but so we really try and between me and like the volunteers and the students to have as large of a reach as we can. And one of the reasons we do that is because we know that nationwide the data and the statistics and all of the analysis
Yep.
people do, the research tells us that only 6% of high school students are asked to register to vote. And nationally, only 40% of high school students go to college. So if we're not engaging students at the high school
Yep.
level to engage and kind of get them comfortable and have them be informed about how the process works, then 60% of students aren't getting that knowledge and they aren't getting the opportunity to really dive in through a supported way, through a way that has like a teacher or a community member that they can
Yep.
turn to and be like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
you know, I had a student once on a college campus that I was talking to and I asked them, I was like, oh, did you go vote? And they're like, no, I went into the polling booth and it felt like a test I had never studied for, so I turned around and left.
Yeah.
And that's something I want to avoid, right? Because the ballots do look a little bit like a Scantron. And so if a student has a lot of testing anxiety and they don't know that nobody is going to know who they voted for, that their vote is their vote, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody is reviews their ballot to make sure that anything is right or wrong. Like that doesn't exist in voting. And so making sure students know that their ballot is individual to them. There's no right or wrong answer, that
Yeah.
they can leave as many of those bubbles for water district or whatever they don't know something about blank as they want to. They don't have to answer every referendum question. Those are the kind of things that we really want to make sure students know.
Yeah. And I know, I think it seems like to us, like as adults, the concept of, the local government and participating in elections and, because we got the practice throughout, maybe we went with our parents, maybe we had, education on civics and things like that when we were in school. It is important to have that divide. And even I know we have, standards to follow, and every school district has certain types of things in their curriculum. But thinking about pieces that we can fit in to bridge that divide of like, hey, the things we're talking about in school and in your gov class, this is how it actually plays out in your community. And getting them involved and seeing that process, we got to take advantage of that in the classrooms. We got to be able to have that real life connection piece in order for it to really stick with them. So I think these statistics too are just really significant in terms of people in my position, high school civics teachers looking at it and be like, okay, what can I do even if I have a class period to get this exposure to the high school students that are in front of me in that real life playing out of the action.
Yeah, and we can do presentations like sometimes when schools are like, oh, like we don't want to host a voter registration drive here. We can still come in and do a like what is it to go vote and
Yeah.
show pictures of the polling locations and show pictures of a voting booth and like show the sample ballots, and that way you're getting those more engaged and more real life examples of what would it be like.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so some of the resources we've talked about the bill tracker that the youth council develops. We've talked about some of the trainings that we have. We also went over the Civic Digest. Um, and the local government curriculum is a piece of curriculum that I would love to share with you all. And it's a curriculum resource that we developed over the course of a couple years. We did a guide to local government, and the guide to local government has a it's about like a 50-page PDF that dives into all of our levels of local government work. And we heard the feedback from teachers that this isn't as useful in our classroom, right? Like there needs to be a translated version of this for classrooms. And I know I didn't include this in our PD PowerPoint, but I sent you one for specifically
Oh,
for
okay.
local government.
Oh, I
Um,
see. I'll pull
if
it up.
you, okay, if you see it around, it's it's a eight, 6 module, so 6 classroom lessons is divided up into ways for teachers to engage with this local government curriculum and really help students learn the difference between all of our different types of municipalities and all of the different types of ways that students can be involved, whether that's a town parks committee or a town water district. And so this is the
Is this the one you're
preview.
talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the preview. Here I am again. There's another email address. We've already talked a bit about this of like who Maine Students Post is and who our Civic Digest and what our Civic Digest is. And this curriculum was created because we were hearing from teachers and we were hearing from folks in the community that they didn't have a concise way to talk about local government. And so you'll see here that there are now 6 modules. They're 45 minutes long. There's 8 activities across the modules that go through an introductory level of what is local government to a little bit deeper to explore more of the details of local government, then to explore the positions in local government and who does the work. And then we talk about where are decisions made. And then we dive a little deeper specifically into municipal. And then the last module is a like hands-on putting it into practice, having the students write their own ordinance or write their own proposal for something that they're looking for. And so this goes through a couple of the activities if you want to flick over. So as we know, the purpose of local government is a way of legislating and making laws that is controlled geographically. So when we zoom in from state level, we have county, then we have, so sometimes we have districts that have multiple counties. Sometimes a county is a district. We also have city, town, and sometimes regional forms of government. There are generally two types of areas where they find the work falls under. So that's public service and decision making. Public service is everything from your fire department to your library funding to your parks and rec. Decision making is kind of your municipal courts, your appeals board, your city councils, the places where you have town meetings. Um, and we organized this mostly by size because it seemed like the best way to talk about it. We tried once. One version of this had us dividing it into the branches of the government, like the three branches, but they didn't fit well
Yep.
for local government. So we switched to this by size. So of course there's the county, and some of the things that are controlled at the county level will be airports, some of the emergency services, sometimes jails and sheriff's departments. Then there's municipalities. We have just under 500 municipalities across the state of Maine.
Wow.
They're the ones in white in this map, and they have more authority and more decision making than county government structures. There tend to be your select boards, your city councils.
Yep.
They administrate our elections, and they make your local ordinances of like, can you set off fireworks in your backyard? Can you have chickens? Like those decisions get made at this municipality level. After municipality, we have townships. So townships, there's a little over 400, and townships are in green in this map. And townships are normally in rural areas. There's a few exceptions, but mostly they're in rural areas. And only about 9,000 people in this state live in a township. A township is a level of government that can't make laws or ordinances, but they do tend to partner with local municipalities to run elections, and they will work with the state and the county to create kind of ordinances. And then the other type of government in Maine that not a lot of folks know of is plantations. And so plantations are the smallest form of government that we have. I think if you click again,
There we
yeah.
go.
So there's 34 of these. They're very, very small communities. And they're spaces where things are done through annual meetings. Mainly the things that plantations do are decision makings through budgeting. And if you go to the next slide, the other type of local government is a district. So smaller than your municipality. Inside a municipality, there's often districts, and sometimes we call these wards.
Yep.
There's over 192 separate districts around the state. These are water districts, these are health districts, these are school districts. These are spaces where decisions are made locally about a specific area that can sometimes cover multiple townships or plantations or municipalities.
Just like the concept, like government's everywhere, right? And
Yes.
we kind of like have that community conversation with our students in our classrooms, like, y'all, government's everywhere. It's everywhere. It really is.
It is, and it's different forms of different government, and it's different shapes of government that have different purposes. But there's always somebody. I feel like if you have a thing you want to change,
Yeah.
You just need to know who is it that makes the decisions so that
Yep.
you can work with them to make the change that you're interested in. So we also cover tribal governments, and uh, one of the distinctions that it's pretty important to make when talking about tribal governments is that they're not a type of local government. I know this is inside of the local government curriculum, but sometimes that distinction isn't always super clear. They are sovereign nations within Maine that have their own forms of government and lawmaking. And if you click over to the next slide, this is an example of one of the activities that we have within this guide. And so we give an overview of each of the tribal nations and the specific areas that they're in. And then we ask students to find out who is the elected and who is elected into leadership positions for each of those locations and how many elected officials are there. What are the governing and decision making rules for each of those communities, and are there appointed positions? And each of those 5 locations that we showed on the last slide have amazingly informative websites. So that's where
They
we
do.
send
Yes.
students. We send them into small groups and then give each student the link to one of their websites to kind of see like, oh, they have this team has a school district, or and like this team has a governing board and this team has, and that way they can kind of dissect a different type of government that exists alongside of the governments inside in the state of Maine.
Yeah, that's super duper helpful to compare and contrast those areas. And also like it just brings again that local government to life and brings that awareness of seeing like, hey, this is some of the bigger ideas I'm learning in my class. These are how they're playing out too in real
Mm-hmm.
time in the state that I live
Yeah.
in. That's so cool. That's awesome. You have a share
Of
out.
course, there's always a little share out, right? Like, what did you learn?
Yeah,
And that way, like each group can report back, and everybody can learn a little bit about each of those
it's
forms
so
of
cool. And so so you go, is this just like the one module on here and then you have like various different versions of these
Yes.
available?
So each of the 6 modules, we have a Google Classroom that I can share out, and you can add to some of our after we wrap up resources. And the Google Classroom has PowerPoints and activity worksheets, and kind of each of the 6 are broken down into their own kind of. And this was just like one example of an activity from the first. I think this is in the second module, actually. Like after you've learned a little bit about local government and dove in a bit, then we have you compare to levels of tribal government.
That's wicked cool. I love it. I know it's which I'm sure you've heard, like the teaching game is the crunch time of
Mm-hmm.
where do we fit things in the curriculum? Because a lot of our, standards for Gov are national centric, right? But there's always, I find, like a couple days here and there where I think we can definitely make those tie-ins to local government, or there could be, certain seasons, like election season, I think is a time where a lot of classrooms are kind of talking about those local government aspects as well sometimes towards the end of the school year, kind of thinking about how we can bring in those conversations about local government. And I think those are pretty succinct, lessons and pieces that your teams have curated for classrooms to be able to use and access. So I'll definitely put those resources on. So I have a Padlet link with all of our like state resources. So if you're willing, I'd love to put those up
Yeah.
there for folks. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, we would love to share these out. And it's a curriculum that we launched in February. So if teachers are using it and they're like, hey, this doesn't work quite this way, or like doing this in the classroom, I actually needed this much time. Like we're always wanting to hear that feedback so that we can keep making this more and more of a useful resource for folks.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the more feedback, the more connected, we have access to three really awesome organizations that are living and breathing what we hope we get across with civic education. I think the more that we can kind of again open that doorway to connect collectively and share resources and have community members come in and get their expertise on real life civics is all the more important to have those resources available. So I know last kind of little just screen here, just general QR codes for folks. So I have our civics Padlet that I'm putting together this year with the Office of Teaching and Learning. So a lot of the resources from these monthly PDs and some of the resources that Allison talked about today, I'll drop on our Padlet too later this week. Um, there's a newsletter link for Civics Digest is there for y'all. Other resources to the Maine Students Vote page is also there for you to reference along with our emails. Then we got a few minutes left. See if I can get my Zoom here to branch out. I'm not sure. Last slide. Ba-da. Okay. Oh,
The
I
sun
can't
has gone
minimize.
down at my house.
Oh
So I
no.
was like, oh, hi, I gotta go turn
Darn.
on the light.
Let me see. There was another thing. I have got too many screens open right now. Let me close that tab. Go back to the other page.
Now I'm not in the dark.
Yay. All right, let me find that again. And flash that up.
And I think one of the spaces and the work that we're really trying to do with all of these resources is share things that are working well in your classrooms, right? So, and share things that are successes. So if anyone who's watching this later on has a resource where they're like where they really had a bunch of success doing a certain type of activity with students and you want to share it out to other teachers, we would love to write up about it in the Civic Digest and help promote the approach that you used with other folks in your school.
Awesome. I'm just going to the end of this
Yeah.
picture here. So it's one more
One more
flash of an
email.
email, logos and things like that. But
Yes.
awesome. I know one of the participants that was on ended up having to leave a little early. Um, so we don't have any more audience for questions, but I do hope that folks that might be watching feel free to either reach out to me if you have questions about where to access any of their resources at all in any way, shape, or form. Or if you want to sign up for the Civics Digest, want more information about any of the organizations that Allison mentioned here today, feel free to send her an email as well. I really appreciate you coming on today and having this conversation with me.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here and talk about the resources we have and the ways we're always excited to partner and help out. So thanks for asking me in.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.